Hello and welcome to ARC360's The Future in Focus digital event series. Before starting, we'd just like to thank our corporate partners, BASF, BMS, CAPS, Copart, Emacs, Integral, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Mercer, Nationwide Vehicle Recovery Assistance, S&G Response, and Sherwin-Williams, as well as our partners, Aztec, the Green Park Specialists, Indasa, Prasco, and the Innovation Group. Thanks, and we hope you enjoy the following webinar.
So where now? That's the big question. And again, a bit of a fly on the wall kind of session now. Lee Warbank, Managing Director of IRG, Daniel Lewis, Financial Director of IRG, and Thomas Edwards, Director of Lexington Corporate Finance. So the disclaimer, before we go too far, the views and opinions expressed during the following webinar are those of the individual contributors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the contributor's employer, organisation, committee, or other group or individual. Please respect any all contributions, and we encourage you to join the conversation via the interactive functions available. So here we are. Hi guys, all okay?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Yeah, good, thanks.
That's what we like to hear. So, Thomas, how's the world been treating you? I think it was, it was a couple of months ago maybe that you joined us and gave us a great insight into how kind of it all works financially when investing in business MBOs. How has the world been in those past few weeks?
Yeah, look, thanks for inviting me back. No, it's been good. You know, the sort of corporate finance and mergers and acquisitions world is really busy at the moment. There's a lot of money in it flying around, a lot of corporate acquirers, and look, pertinent to what we're talking about today, we're seeing a lot of MBO transactions as well. So yeah, cautiously optimistic.
Brilliant, that's what we like to hear. And Lee and Dan there. Lee, how's the world treating yourself and IRG as a whole?
Yeah, not bad. Same as everyone else, waiting for volume to pick up. But yeah, we're doing okay, doing well.
Yeah. Good. And Dan taking care of the pennies there, obviously, on that side of things.
It's been a strange year, especially for the first year, but no, we're doing pretty well at the moment, but same as everyone else.
Brilliant, great stuff, and congratulations, by the way, because you've had a recent addition to the family. So he's been a busy man the last couple of weeks. So thanks very much for sparing the time for us today. Really appreciate it. All right, so
let me get out the house.
Any excuse. Yeah. All right, so the topic of conversation, so IRG, tell us a little bit, Lee, when did the kind of deal take place? When did you sign on the dotted line, if you like, just so we can put a time scale on things? When did it all take place?
I mean, we signed 31st of January 2020. Steve and I initially started talking about an MBO maybe 2-3 years prior to that. We traveled together a lot, going to different events and stuff, and you just end up talking for 4 or 5 hours every day. And yeah, it just came to, we're in the car talking one day, and we mentioned it to each other, had a chat, and when we were both ready, when we had the right team in the business, that we'd move forward. But I know he'd always promised Jan, his wife, that he'd be out when he was 60. And as the time came near, then we started getting a bit more serious over it. The size of the business, obviously we knew we needed a team. 1-2 people couldn't have done it. So Dan had been in the business as a finance manager for 4 years at the time, I think it was, maybe 5. Obviously Phil and Joe were involved also, and we just had the right team at that time. And Steve and his son Dale came to us and said, I think that was the right time, we could start talking about it. And we discussed some things, obviously price and timescales and stuff. None of us knew what to do because neither of us had done it previously. So Dan started looking for some financial advisors, really corporate financial advisors. We'd met with Lexington and a few others, and then we liked Lexington. we met Thomas and his boss Gary, and engaged with them. Then that was in the March, I think, March 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like, yeah.
Yeah, it was 19 because
Yeah.
we completed in 20.
Yeah.
Don't know where the years go now. But yeah, I think, we met with Thomas and Gary. We had a chat, some kind of timescales that we could complete by. And I think it took us all by surprise initially because we thought it might have taken a year or so. And like 6 months, yeah, it did take a year or so. But they were, oh yeah, we could do this by August. And we're like, Jesus, I think it was October 1st, sorry, not August. Yeah. And yeah, we ended up, we engaged with Thomas and gave him the reins to go and find us the deal.
And away he went. So we'll fill in a lot more of the detail. But and I think last time you were on, January 2020, 2 months later. We're in a different kind of state, but we won't dwell too much on that because we're looking at that particular timeline right now. So Jan 2020. Thomas, just very briefly from your side, again, we're going to delve into the kind of detail very shortly. Is what Lee's just described kind of typical of an MBO, whether it be, any line of business, any industry?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I think, in terms of when we got engaged to completion, that was sort of maybe a 7, 8, 9 month process, which I'm sure we'll go into that into a little bit more detail. I think the great thing about IRG was the management team had a great relationship with the vendor and Steve had done a lot of the fundamentals. He'd put in that management team, that layer. The succession planning was already done. And that's a major, major part of it, because you can't do an MBO unless you've got a management team with all the gaps filled. And Steve had obviously thought about that for a long, long time. And by the time we got involved, the sort of outline structure of the deal had been agreed between management and Steve at a sensible level as well. So from our perspective, I wouldn't say it made our job easy, but it certainly made it a bit smoother.
Yeah, well, that'll be interesting, actually, if we come back to those points, because it obviously sounds like it can completely go the other way and make it extremely hard work for you. So perhaps we'll, if we get round to it, just delve into what makes it really hard work. So Lee and Dan, so let's kind of, put the cards on the table. MBOs, I've heard described as grueling, probably many other words out there. Knowing what you do now, would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely a tough process, wasn't it? It was, it took over probably the best part of 10 months of our lives, as well as trying to do the day job. So it was tough, but to do it, you find by doing it, you understand the business more as well. So, when we're going through the process of trying to acquire the business, as Thomas mentioned, then the gaps and stuff, you start seeing where those gaps are as you're going through the process, and it enables you at the end of, when you get to the end, you've got a clearer picture as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Dan had been with us 4 years or whatever, and all he'd lived was accounts. He'd never looked at KPIs or operations, or never actually knew the business that he worked in really and what we did. So, it shared a lot of information and gave him a lot more of understanding of the business then. And likewise for me, all I ever was operations. I mean, from a painter to everything else and up to management. But I'd never really got involved in finance other than your monthly P&Ls. So we all ended up working a lot together. There's a lot of late nights in the village hotel, a lot of beers, and yeah, just getting to understand each other. I mean, we'd all worked together for a while. We all got on very, very well. And look, it's probably different to most, I think, probably directorships in that, the four of us are friends, really. Us and our partners will always go out, we'll have drinks, we'll always meet up. We forget that many a time we're actually directors of a business because we just do our jobs, we do it well, we have a laugh, we have a joke when we can, but we're friends first and foremost. So, that it kind of got, I was close with Phil because he was my support for a long time in that group role, and it drove the work we had to do, drove us closer as a foursome, which was probably a bit unexpected, but yeah, we're lucky that we all get on really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really interesting point in terms of I suppose really, leaving no stone unturned in terms of the business as a whole, but also kind of having then a greater appreciation for each other's vantage points on the business, perspective on the business. Thomas, again, is that kind of a real key to any sort of MBO? Is that you do start to have that real, teams come together like that and understand each other's positions and really get to the nitty gritty of how the business operates.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, and I think that Lee alluded to it. I think eyes get opened as well to a lot of things because you're as a management team you're highly valued, but you don't quite see everything. You're not quite looking under the bonnet of what's there. And as part of an MBO process, the vendor's just got to keep the car analogy going. He's got to lift that bonnet for you to see what's in there. And I think it does open management teams' eyes to, actually, there's a hell of a lot that goes on to keep this company going. Yeah. Look, management teams, in this case, it was great. There was 4 really different skill sets, all in different parts of the business. It was brilliant. And that sort of varies. Sometimes we work with management teams and there's only one person who's got to bear the load. But with the IRG deal, it worked really well because the 4 of them all took on slightly different roles within the MBO process.
And I suppose whilst we're on this and using the analogy of lifting the bonnet, there's got to be a lot of trust in there between the current owner and the potential buyers. And again, we'll come on to kind of what potentially I suppose could go wrong. But these guys were in a good place. They had that relationship. Where does it kind of go wrong? Where can it go wrong in that sense? Can it be a bit kind of cloak and daggers type relationship sometimes, and that will sort of, that's destined for failure?
Yeah, it's where there's not that really constructive relationship or open discussion about succession planning. If you've got an ambitious management team there that would like to take the business on, I think it is always quite difficult. I think the best way to try and approach it is I think you've just got to try and have an open discussion with that shareholder and vendor. But look, it is a very delicate discussion to have. These businesses, as it was the case in IRG and Steve Pert, these are people's babies, and it's that you're only going to sell it in the main. Most people only sell their business once, and it's got to be absolutely fundamentally right. And I think management teams, you've got to just tread that fine line between being ambitious enough to come and say, look, actually, what's your exit route here? Between actually perhaps stepping out of your lane and going a bit too far, you can cause friction because there's all sorts of different characters in the world. Look, I went to see a management team last week where the relationship between the MD and the shareholder isn't as great as it was in this case, and I think that one's going to be probably going to be a difficult transaction. But that's where people like us can come in, and we can try and act independently for the company itself and not a shareholder. And we do we call it an options review, but it's like a strategic review that just says, look, if you're going to look at an MBO type transaction, this is what we think it's going to look like. And we can try and take some of the sting out of those conversations.
Yeah, that's great. Really good insight. Right, I'm going to come back to you now, Lee. So you said the conversation sprung when you were on the road with Steve on a 4-hour journey. That could have gone arguably potentially wrong. But how does that, how do you kind of approach that conversation? And what was that conversation? What did it look like?
It is hard. I never hid my ambition from when I joined him back in 2007. From then, I always showed that I wanted to progress. So as the business grew, as I grew in the business, I think it was seen more as it was probably an inevitability, really. I think the serious point when we were talking, we're actually driving to Hereford. And I can't actually remember the words too much. I just remember us having the conversation and thinking, this could happen, And I think that the ambition and the growth and understanding what what he wanted, because I think knowing Steve, because we were pretty close, we talk every day pretty much, knowing that he wouldn't have just sold the business to anybody. This, as Thomas said earlier on, I think you get shareholders, you get business owners that build a business to sell, and he built a business to sell. We always spoke about that, but it was his baby. He wanted it it wasn't just a cash cow. He didn't want to sell just to fill his bank. He wanted it to continue and grow, and having the right team was just as important to him as it was to me, because the future of the business was going to be whoever was with me as part of the management team. So yeah, it is a nervous conversation, because I think you run through all kind of scenarios in your head of how it could go. As Dan said, I could have been walking home. But I think because we were so close, because we spoke all the time and we discussed everything all the time, it just matured into that understanding that, I wanted this and he wanted it also. It wasn't, I want to get every penny out of it as I can. As Thomas said earlier on, we won't disclose how much the deal was, but, it was a fair deal for us and for him, which I think obviously helped Thomas a little bit in finding the finance for us. But it is, I can imagine there's people there now that want to approach their boss to do the same. And I think, there's no regrets. You just got to go for it. Just got to have that conversation. I think most people, they may get shocked at the time. And I think, Steve could answer that. But, I think knowing someone's in your business today and have the passion and the want to take that business forward, it's probably a good feeling for someone looking to sell their business.
Yeah.
And there is that trust. Like you said earlier, there's a massive trust element to it, because they hand in, regardless if they get money or not, they hand in their baby over to somebody.
And that's, huge credit. I don't know Steve. I've sat down with Steve many times. He's very honest, open, transparent guy, great guy, very, very inspirational. And full credit to him in terms of, what he did there. And he obviously saw you as kind of, the succession plan, I would think, from an early stage. So it's, it's great to have that vision from the leader, I suppose, and also, the understudy at the time. And so to make that change at the right time, credit to you both for approaching it in that way. So what comes next? You have that conversation. You may take a big gulp when kind of, for example, Steve turns around and says, yeah, that's a good idea. Reality then hits home, I suppose, to some degree. What do you do then? Just pick up the phone to Dan and say, oh, my goodness, where'd you go?
I'll tell the truth, even though Dan might cringe a bit over it. So, I mean, that conversation we had in the car was probably a year or two before we actually pulled the trigger. He and I touch base every few months, because on my own, I'd started looking for some advice, because we don't know what to do. We have no idea, I was a painter turned manager at some point. And Dan was actually going to leave the business and go to Gibraltar. I'd be based in Spain for some finance accounting company. I don't know, you can tell now. But let's leave that bit. That's why I said he'd get embarrassed. But and Steve came to me the one day and he said, Dan's given his notice. I said, okay, why? And he's like, oh, he's been offered this, blah, blah, blah. How do you feel? And I was like, well, knowing that I don't do anything with finance and such, is it worth speaking to him about a potential management buyout at some point? So Steve, I don't know the conversation Steve had with Dan, and he can explain it now, but we came to an agreement that Dan was going to be a part of it there, or offered a part of it there, because, very quickly he'd come up into the finance department and was running it below Diane. So it was the first part of the jigsaw there and then that we made that structure.
Never heard this story before, actually. Like, it's in.
Have you not?
No, you've never told me that. You actually had that conversation.
Yeah.
Surprising, actually. So from then Steve sort of approached me, we sat down, we had a conversation. And he sort of literally sort of what he's discussed with Lee. He discussed with me, the potential of an MBO and this and that. Sort of like, he actually handed me a contract with it written in at the time, actually. And we discussed it. And to be honest, at the time, this was September 18, I think it was. And we sat down, we discussed it, and sort of like took me at surprise. And I went home and spoke to my wife. We discussed it and decided, we were putting all our plans on hold.
Sold your house.
We'd actually sold our house as well, and we actually, decided, we're going to stay. But I think the biggest shock was that, we always knew that it was going to be a 2 to 3 year sort of process. And I think it was 6 months later was when I think it was myself. Well, we had an email from Steve, didn't we? We all thought we had been sort of court-martialed. He emailed us saying, "Can you meet in the morning in Cardiff boardroom?" No subject, and that was it. So we all turned up, and
so like I knew.
Okay.
So Steve and I spoke. Like you said, we were close. We had to build a team together. He had to have confidence that we were going to move forward right. Phil was always going to be a part of it. He joined not long before. It was a couple of months
before me. Yeah.
I think it was February 2015, and I know that because it was when I went into the group role and I was looking for a replacement for myself. But he came in a different role in a HR and compliance, and he was a rock. He was there for whatever we needed. You could throw anything at him, and he understood BSI, all the manufacturer approvals, all the HR. He took the whole department on his own. So Phil was always going to be a part of it, and then there was me, Phil, Dan, and we probably just felt a bit. The three of us could have done it, but there needed to be a fourth. We felt with the size of the business and what the growth opportunity, the want we had. And Joe Moore joined the business in, I think it was August 18. No,
July 18.
July 18. Yeah. And I'd known Joe. I used to deal with Joe when I run the parts department in Cardiff, because he was parts in Evans Offshore Ford in Cardiff for 17 years. So Joe joined the business as a group parts manager. And he just added another dynamic, lots and lots of sales experience, be it parts, or he was business manager for Evans Offshore Ford. And it just gave us more experience. And whilst it wasn't directly body shop, he loves an Excel sheet, loves stats. And and it just fitted in that management operation style of data. So Steve and I had sat down, I think a few days before he'd sent the email Dan referred to, and it was like, this is the four, I think. And he was like, yeah, I don't disagree. So that's when he sent us the email. And it was just a conversation then, because we had to sign NDAs, obviously, and move forward, all of that.
I think that was when it started, really, wasn't it? And he gave us a timescale there and then as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was
I'm sure it was August. And then it pushed to October.
It was October. August was mentioned initially, but it was October because he was turning 60 that year. And it was his 40th wedding anniversary. And he booked a 3-week holiday to take the whole family in the October. So that was the deadline. And everyone, Thomas can tell every potential lender we spoke to was like, yeah, that can be done. And
it never got done.
Right. Come on then, Thomas, pick up the story for us. So you receive a phone call from this business called IRG, who are looking at an MBO.
Yeah.
How does that first conversation go?
So I think we had a brief chat and then set a date for the guys to come into the office to meet with myself, my colleague Gary. And I think you get these calls and you say, yeah, sounds good. The first thing you do is you jump on Company's House and have a look at the business. What does it do? And look, never heard of IRG before. And yeah, had a look at it and thought, wow, this looks like a really, really interesting opportunity for us. So met with them, got on well, gave the guys a sort of proposal, and they agreed it, and we were off, which was brilliant for us. It was great to work with a business like, of the strength and caliber of IRG. It's exactly the sort of company at Lexington that we want to work with. And then it was very quickly into, well, look, what are the next steps? Setting out to the guys. Look, I think the thing we always say, you've got that word grueling. You said that earlier, Mark. I think I always tell clients, look, it's going to be hard, guys. It'll be good fun, but it's going to be a really difficult process. And then we were really, really quickly into pulling together the materials we needed to go out and speak to lenders. Like I said, the overall or headline deal structure had been agreed, and it was at a level that we knew we could get debt funding on, which was great. Look, sometimes vendors think their business is worth, 20 million, when really it's only worth 10, and you're like, it's just not going to work. But here there was a really sensible view on deal structure. Worked a lot, Dan and I spent a lot of time together in this room, pulling together. You always have a financial model, which is just sets out the business's growth plan for the next 3 years on a P&L, balance sheet and cash flow. And you have an information memorandum, which is like a prospectus on the business, setting out its key strengths, the management team, where they sit in the market and what its growth plans are. And we were really quickly into sitting down and meeting some funders and doing some presentations. I think the guys did about 5 or 6 2-hour sessions with a number of funders, we probably started in earnest in about the May time, didn't we? And then probably sort of May, June, July, met with funders, and then sort of August, September time settled on a particular funder and signed heads of terms with them.
Away it goes. Wow. And from your perspective then, Thomas, how do you sort of align a prospective buyer with a business like IRG? Does it work on scale? Does it work on how much kind of finance needs to be input? Does it work on industry returns? How does it all kind of piece together, I suppose? Yeah,
in terms of selecting a funder, obviously you've got the sort of main clearing banks, and then there's you can fund these deals in 2 ways. You can either do a debt funded deal like the IRG deal, or there's a private equity route as well, which was the what ABL One Touch did back before Christmas. So look, we were on the debt funded route, which I think is what the guys had always talked about with Steve anyway, and because Steve wanted the 4 members of the management team to hold the equity amongst themselves. So look, there's not a big pool of funders out there, but they are sort of the main pool of sector agnostic. There's some size criteria, but there was no issues on that with IRG, given the quality of that business. And yeah, we just went and met them, sent them the prospectus and the model. Got some early feedback, which is really, really positive. I think that's one of the reasons why the deal perhaps took a little bit longer, because there was quite a bit of interest in it. We spent quite a while, guys, didn't we? Just really picking the right partner with the right terms. And in the end, that was an outfit called Thin Cats, which pulled out a great deal for us, for the guys, and have been really supportive sort of the last 12 months, given everything that's gone on as well. Great stuff. And guys, come back to the IRG. So it sounds like you kind of had a choice of backers ultimately. Sat down with Thomas, obviously in consultation in terms of the numbers and the bit behind it, but how did you kind of choose what backer works for you? Is it purely on terms, or is there a cultural kind of link there?
We've always been a relationship business. We've never chased the maximum discount we can get or the last penny. We've always looked for right service, best relationship, and we met with several. We had a couple of good offers, and we reviewed it, and it wasn't purely down to interest rates or best return. It was about trying to understand their business and what they could offer. And I mean, to be fair to Thin Cats, they were relatively new, but they've been fantastic. I'm talking now, and I'll let Dan talk now, because he's done far more. I mean, lots and lots of this deal is all financial. And as Thomas just said, now he and Dan spent so much time together sorting all this out. Dan did so much work on it, far more than the other 3 of us did. That we'd sit down, we'd meet, we'd discuss, we'd agree, and then Dan would 9 times out of 10 go away and do the work. But we met with Alison at ThinkCats. We liked her, what she'd offered, what she said about the business, and they had the right ambitions and growth, and they could support us moving forward. If we wanted to and when we wanted to, it was part of the deal of growing. They would support us with more funding if we needed to grow further. So they seemed the best solution to us, and they seemed the right partner for us.
They still are, though, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
Over the last 12 months, they, when, obviously everyone's aware of sort of, 2 weeks after the deal, we got flooded, which, which wasn't great.
Everyone's got covenants. They were hit within 2 weeks. We'd failed us because we'd lost 20% of our turnover.
But they've just been nothing but supportive for us. We've had a tough year. They know that, and I speak to them pretty much every other day, sort of thing. And we discuss things and so on, sort of the business, and if there's any support we need, if there's any information they need. And like I said, I think Thomas has mentioned in the past, for us it was a brand new relationship 2 weeks after, and sort of everything sort of went wrong. And you find from a funder, their true colours, how they support a business that is relatively new to them. And like I said, over the last 12 months, they've just been nothing but supportive for us.
That's great. And so, Thomas, on the sort of funders theme, then back to you and your experiences with others. I suppose, what are the key elements to that? We've obviously said terms, cultural sort of alignment. Duration of deal, how does that look in terms of when these people want to move businesses on or invest further? Again, just explain a little bit more about that from anyone's perspective, really.
Yeah, okay. So I think, we do a lot of work up front, working with management teams to refine what their plan is. And, look, if you're doing a debt-funded MBO, you haven't got to show double-digit growth or grow your EBITDA by 3 times. Ultimately, a debt funder, they ideally they just want to get their money back and their interest paid. So they're not looking for an equity return. So it's about putting together a set of forecasts that that is ambitious enough for the management team, but it's not a stretch case that you end up spooking the funder. So do a lot of that up front. I think that's a really, really important step. Clarity of plan. So management teams take some time to really come up with what you think you want to achieve over the next 3 to 5 year period. Because if there's gaps in it and it doesn't stack up, you will be found out at some point in the due diligence process. But then it's about, look, we've got the deal that we've agreed with Steve in terms of what we're going to get him. So then it's a case of coming up with a structure from a debt perspective that fits in with that and fits in with management's plan. So, it's about, we do a lot of work, a lot of financial modeling to model that. And then we almost go to the funder and say, look, this is what you want. This is what we want. This is the term sheet we almost want. We almost write it for them and let them come back and put their best foot forward. So I think, without delving into too much detail, but there's a loan that's being repaid over time. Then there's a loan with a bullet at the end. And it just really works for the business. I think that's really flexible to move with our approach. In terms of repayment of that loan, you're typically on an MBO, you're typically looking at probably 5-year repayment terms on a debt funded MBO. You can tweak that, get maybe a bit longer, but that might be you might end up with a higher interest rate if you push that out to 7 years, for example. You could go for 3 or 4 years, lower interest rate. But then you've got your monthly repayments are a little bit higher. It's just about coming up with that balance, which sometimes can be quite a difficult balancing act.
Right. Yeah. And I was going to say, IRG to one side, again, experience tells you where do the shortcomings, where can they appear? Kind of, what do you sometimes find when you're kind of doing these things?
Yeah. So I think it is about clarity of a plan. That's really, really important. And then once you've got that and you've got buy-in from a funder, and so ThinkCats and the other funders are all really, really excited about the opportunity. So that's great. You're on a bit of a high. You sign a term sheet, but as soon as you sign that initial term sheet, you're into this really intense due diligence process where it's mainly financial. So I think Dan didn't get much sleep for about 6 weeks, 2 months while this was going on. But, you know, ThinkCat's appointed a firm of accountants called Smith & Williamson to prepare, I think it was about a 100-page report in the end, guys, wasn't it? Yeah. On the business. And they crawl over everything. They go back all over historical financials, contracts, as well as the model. So again, you've got to make sure that everything you're doing throughout, and you know, you'd be surprised how many businesses we meet where things aren't quite in a spick and span. But it's about just making sure your house is in order, tie up any loose ends, because you know, things can spook funders, and I'm not saying they'll walk away from deals, but they may end up tweaking them if something doesn't quite ring true. Fortunately, in the case of IRG, we got a glowing report at the end of that 6 weeks, and that was great. But yeah, it's not always the case.
Yeah, great stuff. There you go. I can see Dan smiling away there. He's done his work. So tell us then, guys. I mean, you've kind of, I suppose, alluded to it already. Lots of late night meetings and everything else, but you know, you've still ultimately had a role to play in an existing business that was thriving. How do you manage it all?
You just do. Yeah. You just do. Like, you just fit in what you're doing. You meet earlier in work. You stay after work.
Fairness, Steve was quite sensible in the sense, like, you know, he would understand if
we needed a meeting.
We needed a meeting in the day. You know, at the end of the day, it was for his benefit as well as ours.
Yeah, we had that understanding with him, and you know, any meetings we had in the day with Lexington, we went to lenders or whatever we needed to do. We had the freedom, but you know, we'd make up for it later on. We'd stay after work and or you'd stay later to do your catch up, and you know, you just fitted it in. So yeah, I mean, it was probably 8-9 months of long days, long nights, you know, meeting up on weekends and whatever we needed to do. But you know, fundamentally, it's all worth it. Yeah, those hours haven't changed, but you know, it's all
a different cause now.
Yeah.
No, I think it was definitely worth doing, wasn't it? And do it again. Yeah.
Good. Right. So Thomas, bounce back to you. And again, we sort of touched upon it last time you were on, and you've mentioned that, you know, that there is money out there at the moment. So do you think we'll see more within this industry of ours? Is that a likely scenario? Is it more business related rather than industry? You know, so what are we kind of looking at from an investment perspective on our industry as a whole?
I think that, you know, I won't labour the point too much, but I think economic conditions perhaps going to be difficult sort of last 6 months of this year and into next year. What it might mean is MBO might be a more attractive route. I think just to go back to it, you know, vendors have got, there's a couple of different routes available to them, and the two main ones are, do I go and sell my business to trade, or do I do a management buyout? A management buyout is, I think if you probably looked at success rates, it's probably that little bit easier to get away because you've already got a willing buyer and a willing seller together. Whereas on a trade sale, you've got to go out and test the market. And with a trade sale, you're trying to align all the stars at once. You know, it's based on your internal timing, your performance, but you're also looking at an acquirer and where are they in their cycle, have they got sufficient funds, and what else is going on in their business. With an MBO, that's a little bit easier. I think that, but then we've got to be careful about is you've got two sides of a transaction that both work within a business, both emotionally invested in a business and a transaction. So you've got to make sure that you keep the management team, especially, keep their eye on the ball in terms of trading, because the last thing you want to happen is trading dips, and that'll spook a funder and a transaction becomes more difficult. But yeah, do I think we'll see more of it in the industry? Yeah, I think we will. I think it's a really attractive route for people. And like I said, I think it's a little bit easier to actually complete than a trade sale. There's two different ways you can go. You've got the debt route or the private equity route. I think from a debt perspective, you know, over the last 12 months, a lot of people have been doing government-backed C-bills. So the debt market is in a little bit of a state of flux at the moment, where the C-bill cycle is sort of coming to an end. There is talk about a recovery loan scheme that I presume then will take precedent as well. So I think it'll be a little bit more slower in terms of debt-funded MBOs. But yeah, private equity, they only really make money by doing deals. And there's plenty of dry powder out there in a lot of the funds that we work with. And I think really good assets and attractive companies, I think they can attract a premium valuation as well. I think, look, a sector like the accident repair sector, ultimately it's been affected because people haven't been out on the road as much. But look, that's going to absolutely change. As soon as people are back out in their cars, they're just going to come back straight back up. So it's an artificial dip for the sector. So I think, and it's typically a sector where there's been a lot of private equity activity as well, both here and in the US. So yeah, I think that's probably a long answer to a simple question, Mark. But yeah, I do. I think it's a really viable opportunity for management teams and vendors out there.
Very interesting stuff. And one more point on that: does scale of business matter, so to speak, or is it more return that you can generate? So, you've already referenced IRG in terms of the scale of their business was attractive. Would it matter if I'm a single entity out there, just looking for a different route or to exit the business, etc.?
I think you can always do an MBO. It's perhaps just how you fund it. I think the private equity guys have got sort of cut-offs at certain levels of EBITDA. That's typically above $1 million. And some of the debt funders are around that level as well. But, there's other ways to fund it, and there's other interesting ways to look at it. So if you're a one-site operator doing, I don't know, let's call it £250,000 of EBITDA, it might be difficult to find an investor to come on board. But what you might be able to do is you could do a deferred deal where you pass the business on to management team. Perhaps you retain a small bit of equity, and then you have an IOU effectively that the business will pay you out over time out of its profits. So there are ways and means to it as well. I think another thing to perhaps touch on really briefly, and I don't want to try and confuse people with a lot of jargon, but what you can do, and I think we'll see this happen a lot more as well, is you can do what's called an employee buyout through an employee ownership trust, where you set up a trust and the employees, all of them collectively own the business through that. That's a really tax efficient route for vendors, because at the moment there's no capital gain tax to pay on those transactions. So I think that's one we'll see a little bit more of as well. I think that, again, without getting too deep into it, I think the social impact of coronavirus and things, I think there'll be a lot more focus on employee ownership. Interesting stuff. And go on, Thomas, I'll let you have a little plug. If I wanted to find out more, come to you. You can kind of look across all of these areas. Yeah, absolutely. Look, we'd be delighted to have a chat with anyone that's thinking about an MBO transaction. In terms of, my specialism, I've got real interest in that. I love working with management teams, doing these deals. Like I said, they're really difficult, but they are great fun. Great stuff. Well, you say great fun. I'm going to come back to the original question then. Grueling. Would you do it all again, Lee and Dan, knowing what you do now?
Yes. Yeah. Without a doubt, really. Yeah. Even after the flooding, even after coronavirus. Yeah. It's. I don't think we absolutely. You grow up even with ambition. You want to own your own business or be a manager or whatever that ambition is. Never did I think we'd have the opportunity we had, and it's been great. We have a great business, a great team that has been built over many years of growth. But yeah, we would, if it didn't happen when it did, it'd never happened. So yeah, we'd absolutely do it again, and we'd do it even after flooding and COVID too. Well, there's a bold statement. You must have enjoyed it.
Is there anything you would do differently? It's easy to say, obviously, in hindsight, but you kind of look at it and think, we might have done that a little bit different or approached that differently. I don't know. But is there anything that kind of stands out to you guys?
If anything, we probably wasted probably a little bit too much time in deciding who we were going to. We were fortunate that we had a few strong offers, and we were probably deliberating. And we probably took best part of 2 months to decide where we were going to go. I can't say that we regret that. I can't say we'd have done it any different, because it was a first for us. You know, we were having to make the right decision because this was going to be a partnership and we were going to owe a lot of money. So, you know, we had to ensure we were going to work with the right business. But I think other than that, probably not. You know, it was tough. It was grueling, but we enjoyed it. There were times we didn't, but you know, they're few and far between. So, you know, we've had great relationships with Thomas and the guys at Lexington. You know, we go out for Christmas drinks and stuff, and you know, we still, some of us do anyway. Yeah, if Thomas doesn't isolate, and but no, you know, we've built relationship, we built friendships, and we made in the end we made all the right decisions that we needed to.
Brilliant. Like to hear it. The only decision, maybe, Dan, you might not have sold your house, but there you go. Anyway, that's another story. True, yeah. Right, so we'll start to wrap things up. If anyone's got any questions, by the way, listening in, please drop something in. This is a fascinating, open and honest insight to the business. I really appreciate it, guys. So, Thomas, I'll come across to you. What would you kind of say? What would be your advice to anyone considering an MBO or simply looking for investment in their business plans at the moment?
I think that you've got to explore your options and make sure it's the right one for you. You know, we meet hundreds of different management teams and vendors every year, and they've all got slightly different aspirations. And I think there's lots of options out there. Take time to explore them and make sure an MBO is the right one for you, because look, you know, it's a big commitment from the management team as well. So I think you've got to talk to your other half and you know, look within yourself and what do you really want to achieve. But I think it's all about. I think I said this on the last call, Mark. It's all about the quality of the management team and clarity of the plan. Those are the two most important things for me. Not just in MBOs, but I think in any sort of transaction you're trying to do. If you're trying to do a trade sale, you're not going to sell it unless you've got a great management team in place.
Brilliant. Great stuff. There you go. Words of advice. Lee, Dan, words from you in terms of, you know, what would advice be to others who may be in a similar position as you were 2-3 years ago?
Just go for it. I think you can spend a lot of time overthinking and you know, trying to evaluate whatever could happen, whatever outcomes from the conversation or anything. But if you enjoy working for the business you're in, as someone wanting to do a management buyout, or you know, if you've got a passion for that and you want to continue with it, then you know, just go for it. I mean, the worst thing is going to happen is you say no. The person you're going to talk to is going to say no, but you know, they might never have thought about it. They may not have had a succession plan. You know, I was fortunate that Steve did, and we spoke about it quite early on. So, you know, that person that owns that business may think 3 months time, they go, you know what, here's a good idea. Maybe even if it was a 50%, and you know, it gives them time to do something else. There's lots of opportunities and different options after that you can make it work, as Thomas said earlier. So just go for it.
I'd say the exact same. You know, it's a lot of work. You know, it's a long process, but you know, at the end of it, it's worth it. It's worth it. Just go for it and just be prepared to put the hours in.
and from a financial, the financial hot seat, we'll call it, Dan, from your side. You know, from your experience, again, you know, what would your kind of advice be to anyone who's, you know, in an equivalent role in another business? Yeah, you know, is there anything they can do to prepare themselves for this kind of stage
process? Yeah, to be honest, it's something Thomas mentioned earlier. You know, you have to make sure all your financials stack up. The due diligence we did it. He said, you know, it was a 6-week process, and it was around Christmas as well, so it was probably the worst time to actually do one. They do cover everything, so you know, you make sure everything stacks up, everything's there. And to be honest, you got to make sure, you know, as well as you're having a forecast of 4 or 5 years, depending on how far you're going, you need to have the historical data as well. There's no good, you know, given a forecast of 3 years, and historically it was just never achieved. So that's the main thing, is making sure, you know, you've got everything there. And yeah, that's really it. And spend a lot of times, like you said, with people like Thomas. He, you know, is one of those ones where he late evening sort of phone calls and so on. But it's, you know, they helped us really well. And
The strange bit was when it was completed.
I know, and it was just no phone calls.
And then there was just no contact.
It was like we went from 10 months of having, you know, I'd speak to Thomas probably 5-6 times a day, and you know, we'd always have probably that phone call after 5 o'clock as well of everything that's gone on throughout the day. And then it was the Monday one day after the deal, because the deal completed on a Friday, and it's like, oh, this is strange. Like there's no phone calls anymore.
On with the day job.
That was the strangest bit. Yeah, it was just like,
What you think is it's 10 months of your life, really. You know, a big part of your life talking to every day. It's like, you know, it's just it just went.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Brilliant stuff. Look, guys, we probably bought ourselves back a little bit of time. Unless anyone's got any questions to fire in, it's been a fantastic overview, and I really do appreciate your time, guys. Great chemistry between you. Obviously, you've built up a heck of a relationship, clearly, between the two businesses. So thank you very much. Now, before anyone disappears, let us know your thoughts in the chat. Be great to hear from you. Let us know what you thought of that session. Huge thank you, obviously, to our corporate partners, BASF, BMS, CAPS, Copart, Emacs, Integral, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Mercer, Nationwide Vehicle Recovery Assistance, S&G Response, and Sherwin-Williams, as well as our partners, Aztec, the Green Part Specialists, Indasa, Prasco UK, and the Innovation Group. Huge thank you, Thomas, to you. Thank you very much for coming back and, again, giving us an insight into the world of finance. We've penciled you in again for later in the year. You don't know it yet, but you will be joining us. It's brilliant to gain that insight. It's excellent. Lee, Dan, thank you so much for being so candid. The fly on the wall kind of webinar, this one, has been brilliant, just to understand, you know, the story behind it all, and, you know, the realities of what goes on with these things. And I'm sure everyone tuning in will really appreciate that open and honest insight. So thanks very much to everyone for joining us. We will catch up with you all soon. Have a great weekend, people. Take care all.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Cheers. Bye.